afternoon. Delighted to be here at this wonderful conclave with conversations. I'm delighted to introduce Rajendra Pawar, Urf Raji, as we fondly know him as. Uh, you know, as entrepreneurs, we all grow up idolizing and looking up to Raji. It's been, what, 45 years, 44 years of NIITing and of being in the education space. And I know it's going to be a hard task to condense 45 years of learning in about 360 seconds. That's what we'll attempt to do. And then open it up for questions and conversations. So welcome, Raji, and let's jump straight in.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Uh, you know, sometimes they say ignorance is bliss. When I started off Meritrack in 2000, we had no clue what we were getting into. It just sounded like an opportunity. We jumped in only to realize later the challenges in the education space. Given that we have a spectrum of entrepreneurs in the room, if I'm a young entrepreneur wanting to get into the education space, what's your advice? Should you do it, not do it? How should you do it? What are the things to watch out for?
Well, if you're thinking about it, you should absolutely do it. But just you have to look back at life and say, what a couple of things to be more mindful about. One is the big question of why are you doing education? And post the boom that happened in 21, COVID boom, when there was no other choice for people to learn but through online, we extrapolated and said that society has found a new way, so everybody should be online. So people jumped in not because they wanted to do something in education, but they want to do something in edtech. So first question is, why are you doing it? And second question is, what's your right? What's the rites of passage you have? Why do you even consider you can do it well? Those two actually have turned out to be more fundamental questions that I've been talking to people, because people got in for different reasons. So my co-founder is here. He takes 80% of the credit and I do 80% of the talking. But we've asked this question to ourselves. People have asked us for 100 years. Okay? And finally, the answer we got was after about 15 years of being in it, to say that to me and Vijay and a large number of our senior leaders, it gives us joy to see people grow.
Beautiful.
That's it. Couldn't put it into words. So if you're doing it because you have an inner urge, you should realize it's a damn tough business. It's one of the most tough businesses on earth. But that urge can be strong enough. Exactly. So that's one requirement. Second is, what's your right to doing it? There you have to think about why you. And is it that you have had a journey of education, you found you were still a learner and you want to continue? Is it that you have found a way, like Baiju himself found a way? He was a brilliant teacher, found a way. And many people think that you have a right, so you have to have a right. Then is the question of who do you want to teach? This is a very big question, because now I think every sector, every section, every age group is a potential customer. So who do you want to serve? I think it's a very important question, because once you figure that out, then the next question is, who are the competitors?
Yeah.
And this is very difficult to map in this business, extremely difficult. And now with online, global, and AI, very, very difficult to find out who really is your competition. So I think these are some of the questions you have to ask first before you embark on this. But for those of us who are in it, I've seen many people who've been in it for a long time. They say it's a damn pain, but I'll never do anything else in life. So should have the heart for it.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. I think the why, the what, the who, and the how. Sometimes the most uncommon things are the common sense that one needs to apply. But I completely believe that if you can go back to sleep every night with that good sleep to say, listen, I moved the needle for someone somewhere today, I think that is a motivation enough.
Absolutely.
Let's jump on to the next phase, Raji, in the interest of time. I've gotten started, and then I've figured out the why and the what will I do. Uh, you get stuck at a level where then you're saying, hey, we need to scale this. We need to scale bigger, faster, better, more profits and all that. And especially the last few years, you've seen the pitfalls of hyperscale that is coming out. There are enough and more examples, dead bodies of edtechs out there. As an entrepreneur already started off, how do I resolve the scale versus quality versus impact conundrums in our own minds? What's your thoughts on that?
So I think the quality thing, you have a sense for it, because when you're doing it, you can see what it's doing. The scale question is a little more tricky, because in scale, I think, so I'll give you an analogy. Let's say you're at the cricket pitch and you're batting. And you can see the scoreboard there. And you see a bowler there. Simple question is, where should your eyes be? So everybody will say, well, scoreboard is important. And if you don't look at the bowler, you get out for duck.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at scale, you're concerned, you're carried away by the hockey stick model. So more and more of your conversation, more and more of your time is going on how to scale. So it's like a batsman looking at the scoreboard and the balls are coming at him. That is one. Second, I think when that promise looks visible, then two of the basic human impulses come in and we have to check that. The example you can relate it. One is greed. Greed comes in, and it may not be coming from you. At least some of the cases, these guys I know well. It was what was put in front of them.
Correct.
Was just unimaginable. The possibility of wealth. And second is that those who are putting money in front of you make you look like a bigger hero than you are.
Correct.
So then ego comes in. So I think these two are pitfalls which you find very, very common. So when you're looking at scaling, first get your stuff right, quite clearly. And then be mindful that you don't succumb to these two human weaknesses. Because people who see that you have a good idea want you to succeed. They're not putting money for no reason. But they tell you, I'm in and I'm out. Okay, everything else is your problem, right? So all liabilities are yours. They'll not say it, but the people who get lumped with the liability are the founders who went on a path where they lost the track. So get things right, then they scale, and at that time, I think keep the eyes on the ball and don't succumb to these very common human frailties.
I think that's very fundamental advice, and it goes back to the first point that maybe you should question yourself on the why, that you're doing it before you look
Yeah,
at.
because you'll have hard times. Any business has hard times.
Exactly.
At that time, when you question, why am I doing it?
Correct.
The rational thing will get you to exit straight away. Doesn't make sense. Why am I doing it?
Yeah.
So the famous mountaineer was asked a question, why do you want to climb this mountain?
It is there.
And he says, because it's
It is
there.
there, yeah.
You know? So unless you have that kind of impulse,
Yeah.
it'll be more difficult to deal with difficulties.
Exactly.
You must still have a team where someone has that impulse.
Correct.
Important to have that.
No, that's true. I think, in our experiences, whenever we've taken eyes off the ball and looking at some of the metric is the beginning of the downfall, right? And maybe taking that conversation a little ahead, right? And what was a distant three-letter word, the IPO has now become on everybody's lips now to say, we'll get to an IPO soon. You've been an IPO, you did your IPO what, 93? Wow. So that's like and you were mentioning that you were the only EdTech IPO of the previous millennium.
Yeah, sounds
right?
grand, but that's the reality.
And you've been a public limited company now for, a public listed company now for 31 years. What's your advice it's easy to say, I'll do an IPO, and probably it's easier to do an IPO today. But what are your reflections of being in
but
the public glare?
the fact is, even if you look at this last 20 years, the average time that companies have taken to go to IPOs is 12 plus or minus 2. So it doesn't happen overnight.
Overnight,
Being
Though it
much in a
appears
hurry.
that it looks.
Yeah, but see,
that
when
it can
we
be.
notice companies when they've already done 6 or 7
Exactly.
years, right? So we feel they've arrived yesterday.
Correct.
So it's a 10, 12, 14-year thing. That's one. But I think it should be a charter for everyone to think of it, because what does an IPO mean? IPO means that you, first of all, if you and your team members are invested in the brand and the company, they get some wealth.
Correct.
Okay? And it's good to have wealth, not a bad thing to have. Second is that you actually are building the company to last from there on. You're building it to last. Because what you're beginning to do is you're putting transparency. You're getting more money, first of all. I think you get a test of whether you're worth it or not. You're putting more money. And then you are actually becoming more transparent. So good companies, even when they pre-IPO, are very transparent. They have good integrity. But these things get lost in the detail. So you have an external scrutiny. You have a board. So it's good to get a board of people who are critical of you. They may be friends, but they shouldn't be praising you. Otherwise, you have no value. And then you have guidelines today because of all the things that go wrong which start restricting you. So I think you have to be, it builds sustainability. It builds accountability. The quarterly rhythm keeps you on your toe. And then you divide functions to say who look at this and who'll do the research and who'll do something else. But you're really building the company for longevity.
Thanks a lot, Raji. Really enjoyed this conversation.